What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Modern video. And with all the Nadu stuff kind of running around the Modern format and of course making things very miserable for people and creating convoluted loops and whatever, we have a deck here that is a little bit more straightforward in what exactly is going on. Your hardest decision is how many cards you want to draw rather than trying to separate what things have been targeted and, you know, landfalls and stuff like that. So today we're going to take a look at the Mono Black Necro deck for Modern, piloted by Noah Ma, who went undefeated in Modern, was the first one to qualify for the top 8, being the #1 seed after I think going 7-0 in Modern and then getting 3 wins as a part of reaching the prerequisite match points needed to secure a spot in the top 8. Unfortunately, lost in the quarterfinals to the lone 4-color Nadu player. So a little unfortunate for them, but nonetheless a fantastic run in the Pro Tour, and you know, I believe also getting to qualify for Worlds with that placement. But of course, before we get into Mono Black Necro and what exactly this deck is doing and why it performs so well at Pro Tour Nadu, please consider subscribing to the channel and ring the notification bell if you want to see more videos from me, where we focus a lot on the Modern Pioneer format and doing some other longer form videos. I actually have a pretty neat one cooked up for Friday, so you know, if you want to be, you know, in the loop of that, you want to be able to see it and everything, you know, subscribing and ring the notification bell are easy ways to do that, and of course easy ways to support me and my content as we try to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And y'all have been doing a great job of supporting me, and like all the feedback and everything I've been getting to try to like up the quality of the videos a little bit has been awesome, and I really do appreciate it. So Mono Black Necro, and for players that probably played back in the 90s, this maybe gives you like an eye twitch or maybe some good memories depending on what side of the matchups you were on. But Mono Black Necro is kind of based around this card, Necro Dominance. For those of you not aware, Necro Dominance is essentially a fixed version of Necropotent. So for triple black, you get a legendary enchantment that says that you skip your draw step. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay any amount of life. If you do, you draw that many cards. So if you pay 2 life, you draw 2 cards. You pay 10 life, you draw 10 cards. With the restriction of your maximum hand size is 5, and if a card or token would be placed into your graveyard from anywhere, you exile it instead. So basically, you don't get any dice, triggers, or anything like that. You're not going to end up drawing 15 cards and be like, oh darn, I have to discard 10, and then you just get a bunch of like dredge creatures and whatnot in the graveyard. They all get exiled. You do not get to abuse the graveyard with a card like Necro Dominance. So you have to find other ways to kind of abuse the fact that you can draw an absurd amount of cards, you know, where you, instead of drawing, you know, 1 card a turn and doing your thing, Necro Dominance allows you to essentially draw, you know, up to presumably 5 cards and even more, and in that is kind of its own sub game of exactly how many cards you draw and what scenarios and whatnot. With my like 2 cents in on that is that when you played like a card like Necropotence way back when, you would draw like up to like 8 or 9 cards in hand usually, and then you know, you would basically just keep like the best 7 card hand from those cards. And I would imagine Necro Dominance is kind of the same way, especially with some of the things we get to abuse in this deck, where you kind of want to draw up to like 6 or 7 cards in hand, maybe even 8, depending on the situation and depending on what your hand already looks like before you resolve your Necro Dominance trigger, to make sure that you can use the cards that you're going to be drawing effectively as possible and getting to use as many of those cards. And that's kind of the idea of that restriction on Necro Dominance, is that you're basically only going to be left with like 5 cards in hand. Sure, you're going to draw, you know, up to 7 or 8 cards, but you're going to have to discard some of them as well to the lower hand size and make life a little bit harder for you. However, thanks to a few pitch cards that exist in the format, you can kind of not only, you know, lower like the downside of Necro Dominance, because those cards are going to get exiled anyway, so you might as well like exile those cards to those other spells to get some kind of effect for it. On top of that, they also end up gaining you life, so then you're able to kind of keep necroing and chaining these kind of like huge draws all together to kind of like push your opponent out of the game. And so the spells we're talking about here, March of Wretched Sorrow is an X and 1 black, and as an additional cost, you may exile any number of black cards from your hand, and the spell will cost 2 less to cast for each card exiled this way. And it deals X damage to a creature or planeswalker, and you gain X life which means that if you draw up to 8 cards, then you play this, you have 7 cards left in hand, you exile 2 black cards, and, that gets you down to 5 cards, so you don't have to discard any to your lowered hand size, and you get to deal 4 damage, which means that presumably on the next turn, you'll be able to draw at least 4 more cards, if not more, depending on how kind of like the turns play out. You also have this card, Soul Spike, all the way from Cold Snap. We'd see this in like Mono Black Burn when people were like playing it, and it was kind of sweet, but at the end of the day, just really doesn't like cut it in like the modern format, at least if your opponent's able to be even slightly aggressive. But Soul Spike says that you can remove 2 black cards from your hand from the game rather than pay Soul Spike's mana cost, and it deals 4 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 4 life. So Soul Spike just getting to hit a creature for 4 damage, and then you gain 4 life, meaning that like Soul Spike can take out like opposing Nadus. Most of the time it can hit most of the other creatures that you care about in the format, and it also gains you 4 life as well, which in the same vein as like March or Wretched Sorrow, you're able to play this, hit your opponent if need be to kind of get a little bit of pressure on them, and then able to draw more cards later. Another synergy that I think was very clear when players kind of saw this was pairing Necro Dominance with something like Shieldred. It says whenever you gain life, or whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. So with how Necro Dominance works, you pay the life, we'll say that you're at 10 life, and you pay 5. You're not going to go from 10 to 15, you're going to go down to 5, and then you will gain 2 life for each card you drew. You drew 5, so you'll gain 10, then go up to 15. This is important because you can't just pay every single point of life you have with the Shieldred in play to then draw that many cards, because with the fact that Shieldred means that Shieldred has like a trigger so that you will actually die with just those triggers on the stack, and even though you would gain the life, you'll end up losing the game first. So something to keep in mind, you can't draw necessarily your equal to your life total with a Shieldred in play. You can draw up to that many cards -1, kind of like almost like a Yawgmoth kind of way. But definitely one of the clearest synergies, because again, you just draw like 10 cards, or you draw 5 cards or whatever, you gain 10 life, and you're ready to kind of go again the next turn. And the longer Shieldred gets to stick around when you're doing that, the more likely you are to just keep drawing more and more cards. You're able to Soul Spike your opponent, March or Wretched Sorrow, what have you, and then lead towards winning the game. Speaking of winning the game, how the heck does this deck do that exactly? I mean, sure, it's nice drawing a bunch of cards, but we're not milling them out. We're not doing really anything else. Like, how are we winning the game? And that is kind of up to these other creatures in the deck. So, you have Dauthi Voidwalkers, where you can, compare with Grief, plus kind of like the scam package in Malakar Rebirth and Not Dead After All, you're able to get some cards out of your opponent's hand early, which allows you to draw more cards in Necro Dominance and discard less of them when you go to like your cleanup step and everything. But this also just pairing very well with Dauthi Voidwalker, meaning that you can just kind of like you can take some of your opponent's powerful spells, play them with Dauthi Voidwalker, and the fact that it's also essentially an unblockable creature means that this is going to be getting in for damage constantly. You're going to be drawing a bunch of cards. You're going to be keeping your opponent's creatures in check, and they're not going to really be able to race you, because you're going to be able to gain life on top of drawing so many more cards and getting in for damage. There's like a neat little thing you can do, like on turn 2 or like on turn 1, where like you play a Grief for its evoke cost, and then you can play a Phyrexian Tower, sacrifice it for 2 mana, and then you have access to Dauthi Voidwalker, Bowmaster, or Sorin of House Markov, which has been a very impressive Planeswalker, all things considered, given the fact that I would think probably one of the easier to flip, but one of the weaker Planeswalkers, and I think is proven to be one of the better flip Planeswalkers in the format. So this one in particular, 2 mana, 1/4, lifelink with Extort. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, you exile Sorin, return to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. You can make a food token with +2. It has a static ability that allows you to extort, and then it can deal damage equal to the amount of life you gain this turn to any target. -6 only really comes up. You can gain control of a target creature. It becomes a vampire addition to other type, and you put a lifelink counter on it if you control a white permanent other than that creature or Sorin. So not really all that great, because you're not going to really control a white permanent in this deck. But nonetheless, just getting to deal damage equal to the amount of life you've gained this turn. When you're getting to play things like Cling to Dust, which allow you to gain 3 life if you eat a creature, which will immediately flip the Sorin. You're able to play other spells. Presumably you hit your land drops from playing like Necro, and just kind of continue your pressure. You're able to cast spells, extort them, and then Sorin will end up dealing tons of damage to a creature. Is a creature? Yeah, it deals damage to any target. So you can even go to your opponent's face as well, and this is like a way that you can also win the game. Bogart Trawler is a new card, enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard, and is also a land on the backside as well that can come into play untapped. So it does kind of work out very nicely. It did come up quite a bit, and I've been pretty impressed with this card over the course of the weekend of the Pro Tour. You know, we know Bowmaster is a very good card. You have Fatal Push is like early interaction. You have 4 Thoughtseize. Fellow Profane is another card that seemed like it played very well. You know, 4 mana, getting destroy target creature or planeswalker is fine when you have a land on the other side that is going to come into play on tap, and add black mana so you can ensure that you're going to be casting Necro Dominance. 17 lands, these kind of work out as well too. These backside or these modal double face cards, because they're going to be black cards on the front half that you can pitch to things like Soul Spike and Bogart Trawler, where if you just had these as like lands, it, you know, bumps you up to like 23 lands if you don't have any of these double face cards, which means that it's very likely that you could have a Soul Spike and like black cards that you don't necessarily want to pitch to the Soul Spike, or cards that you don't necessarily want to pitch to the Wretched Sorrow, but you're kind of stuck doing. So playing these double face cards, and especially the fact that a lot of them will be able to come into play untapped if you want to, at the cost of 3 life, means that you're able to, you know, again, have something to pitch to those cards while also making sure that you have lands, and they're pretty good spells in their own right as well. We go to the sideboard. We have 2 Pithing Needle. We have a 3 Surgical Extraction, 3 Break the Ice, which is a really neat card because it destroys a land that's either a snow or produces colorless mana, kind of in expectation for some of the like Eldrazi decks and Tron decks as well. You have a Collective Brutality is like a way that you can discard extra cards. I think a little bit worse, but also at the same time, like, it's totally fine. You end up gaining life from it, so it'll end up letting you draw extra cards. You get to duress your opponent, and then of course potentially kill another creature with it as well. So it's a way that you can kind of get cards out of your hand and then draw a bunch more cards with Necro Dominance. You just don't get to abuse it necessarily in the way that Soul Spike and March or Wretched Sorrow get to. You have 2 Damping Sphere, again, like something for, you know, like Storm mainly. You could also bring this in against Tron as well. Shielder's Edict, decent like removal spell that allows you to make your opponent sacrifice their creatures and whatnot. Ends up being a little bit worse. I don't know how good this is like against like Nadu or anything like that, where even if they are, you know, I guess if they enchant like, or they bestow their Nantuko onto something else and they have like Nadu as like their only non-creature, or excuse me, like non-token creature, then I could see this being good. But aside from that, you know, against like Espergorios or whatever, this could be pretty sweet. Toxic Deluge as well. Ping X life to then give all creatures -X/-X. This is essentially a board wipe when you want it to be. It can kill a bunch of the small creatures while also allowing some of your creatures to stick around. You know, like Grief with a Not Dead After All Wicked Roll token on it. You can pay 2 life, kill everything on the board, and Grief gets to kind of stick around. Same with like Sorin. You're able to, you know, kill a bunch of creatures, and with 4 toughness, it's going to be very hard to kind of get rid of the Sorin. And that is the Mono Black Necro deck for the Modern format. It's pretty good. I mean, it's hard to imagine a card like Necro Dominance being bad when the, you know, the unhinged version, or, you know, like when Necropotence has been such an amazing Magic card throughout the history of Magic. At one point being considered one of the worst cards in the format, or, you know, one of the worst cards ever printed in for Necropotence's sake. And then we've gotten to the point where like Necro Dominance has all these different restrictions on them, and it's still a very good and very powerful Magic card. And probably one of the best performing decks not named Nadu in the tournament, and I could see this deck being a problem going forward. Presumably when Nadu gets hit, or when something from that deck gets banned and ultimately makes it a little less consistent, makes it worse and whatnot. But of course, let me know what you think in the comments down below, what you think of the Mono Black Necro deck. Do you think it's a kind of like a flash in the pan, like it was only good for the Pro Tour, it's not going to be a good deck outside of that, or is it here to stay in the format and kind of be a pillar of this new meta game that we're going to be entering, hopefully post Pro Tour? So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is a free, easy way to support me and my content, and I absolutely enjoy it and growing this community and continuing to make these videos. I do really appreciate it. And yeah, that's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next one.